Yeah, I'll share in a moment, but yes, thanks so much for the opportunity. Happy to chat with everyone. Um, so my story and the story of Neurohope um, begins 12 years ago, and I'd like to share a little bit of the whole thing. It started for me when I awoke in the intensive care unit of a hospital in a fog. I can recall very clearly what I perceived to be this plastic muzzle covering my face, a tube jammed down my throat and into my lungs. And I remember very distinctly hearing the gravelly machine sounding like Darth Vader just breathing next to me. And I had never been intubated before. I didn't even know what it was. And I quickly realized that that was the machine. Those breaths were my own breaths. The machine was breathing for me because I didn't have the ability to do it on my own. And in the midst of everything, everything sort of just flooded right back to my conscious. Uh, I had been paralyzed the day before in a swimming accident, and doctors had reconstructed my neck. They had told me that I had very little chance of ever moving anything significant ever again. And this was the first time I woke up since the incident, since the surgery, and you name an emotion, it flooded to me. Panic, fear, um, disbelief, shock, all of it. And I know a lot of you have experienced this with patients, and this is a very unique audience that knows this journey, unlike some of the others that we share our stories with. But I never in a million years could have imagined the journey that the next decade would take me on, both personally, in my rehabilitation, and mentally, emotionally, and through a healthcare system that really has a lot of flaws in the United States. And I can't speak to what it is in internationally, but I can kind of share my unique perspective of what we go through here in the States. And I gather it's similar, that a lot of you will be able to relate to. So that's what I want to talk to you here in the next half an hour or so. So I would love to share, I'll share my screen for my presentation. Um, let's see here. Looks like I've got to, well, it looks like I've got to do some sort of an operating system upgrade. So maybe I'm not going to be able to. That could be bad. I guess hang on one second. Apologies here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to share my screen. I guess let me try for a couple seconds here.
No worries, Chris. Take your time.
Okay. Zoom is having me go through some. I'm not sure. I
Those updates always happen when you're in the middle of doing something.
Yeah, I do this all the time on Zoom. I don't know why this is not letting me do it.
I'm just checking here.
So there could be another option. I could, if you give me 1 second, I might be able to switch computers. I have the presentation up on another computer as well, because I don't think I'm using a different computer. Let me try that real quick, because this is not letting me doing it. It's saying it's. So sorry about that. Let me try to tune in. Can I disconnect for a second and call back in?
Yeah.
I'm glad this works. So So my story, after, it begins right here on this bridge, the bridge and the day that changed my life, August 8th, 2010. I'll take you back for a moment here. I was 28 years old. I was athletic, active. I had a great job with a tech startup company in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I'm from. And I was very much defined by my physicality, like I'm sure everyone is when they're in their 20s. Like I'm sure so many of the patients there, that before your life changes, you are very much defined by your abilities and what you can do. And on this day, I was kayaking with two of my very best friends in a river in southern Indiana, about 4 hours south of Chicago, if any of you are familiar with the States. And I came across this bridge with some of my friends, and it was a hot summer day, and we came to this bridge. We saw some people jumping off of it, off of that middle area there. We see a man standing. It wasn't ultimately that dangerous. It was deep water, and there were several people jumping off of it. So we thought it would be a great thing to do, cool off, get a little bit of a thrill. So we jumped off a couple times. And then I got a little bit of a bigger thrill. I decided to climb up the top beam to get a little bit of a higher jump. So I was hanging up there on the very top. I felt like a little construction worker in the middle of a city. It was about 50 feet up, and admiring the treetops. And I can remember I was about to jump off, and I heard a voice down below me asking me to wait for a second. It was a voice I did not know. It was a stranger, but he wanted to jump with me. And at the time, I was like, you know what? Everybody could use a partner when you're doing something fun. Come on up. And he climbed up that post right up there with me. And we were sitting there at the top of that beam, like two birds on a wire, like about a foot away from each other. And I can remember very clearly the conversation we had. It was really high up, and I was never afraid of heights, but I still went off that beam pretty quickly. And I remember he kind of acknowledged the scenery, and he goes, man, he's like, you can see everything from up here. I remember cutting the guy off, and I was like, yep. I was like, listen, I'm going to jump in 3 seconds. Are you ready? And he's like, yep. So that's exactly what we did. We counted 3, and we pushed off. And I can remember very clearly looking down at the water, and I remember the drop was long, and I remember the air kind of whistling through my ears. And then the second I hit the water, I could tell something was wrong. I didn't feel any pain. I didn't lose consciousness. I was thinking as clearly as I am now, but it was like a stun gun had hit me. And I was just completely frozen underneath the water. I had no idea what happened. I remember thinking maybe I had whiplash. I remember thinking maybe I'm just stunned for a second. And I tried kicking my feet, and nothing. I tried flailing my arms, and there was absolutely nothing. I was completely frozen, completely paralyzed, and in this straitjacket of paralysis, just floating underneath the water. And I remember feeling like an astronaut, kind of as you're, kind of drifting through space somewhere between the surface and the water. And I can remember I didn't think of drowning at that moment, but it wasn't long until that was a very top concern in my mind. I remember if anyone's ever tried holding their breath underwater, you can try to see how long you can do it. After a while, those alarm bells kind of go off in your head, and you start realizing like, you got to breathe. And I can remember I was a lifeguard and thinking, people don't, when people drown, they pass away by the body involuntarily inhales all that water. And I remember thinking I was really getting close to that moment. And then I felt this little muzzled feeling on my back, and I could tell that my back had surfaced, but my head was still under the water. And I promise you, I was probably within seconds of drowning. And I felt someone tug my arm, flip me over. And I remember the first thing I said was, I'm awake, because I thought everyone thought I was unconscious. And it was the guy that jumped on me. He got to me, he flipped my body over, and he dragged me to the beach. And I just remember just knowing exactly what happened. I remember kind of blurting out, I'm paralyzed. I didn't know it at the time, but what happened was when we jumped, I fell a little bit faster than he did, and we hit the water at about the exact same time. Witnesses said it looked as if I opened up a hole for him and he came in directly on top of me and just snapped my neck on impact. And in the blink of an eye, I was a quadriplegic. My fourth and fifth vertebrae were shattered. And I remember laying there on the beach thinking my life was over. It's one of those moments you don't forget. And it's one of those moments that I'm sure that all of you are aware of with patients you work with, in this field. I was airlifted to the hospital and wheeled into the MRI, and in a blink of an eye, you're introduced to that wonderful world of quadriplegia, which for me looked like this. The reality of the situation takes a while to hit. And again, I know this is an audience that's familiar with paralysis, but when you are dealing with injuries to the central nervous system, all that goes on early on, it's so much more than walking. It's blood pressure issues, it's pressure sores, it's the new reality, it's bowel and bladder function, all of this that you're awakened to. And in a matter of days, you're trying to process this. In a matter of hours, you're trying to process this, really. And mentally, emotionally, you're introduced to this entire new world, and it affects you, it affects your family. And it's a very, it's a journey that you can't even comprehend until you go through it. And within a matter of days, I started recognizing that there's a new process, not only what was going on with my body, but what was going on with healthcare, what was going on with the next steps of injury and trying to recover. And I mean, we all know that healthcare is a complex issue, especially here in the States. It's a political issue. Often the conversation revolves around, what happens or helping people that are uninsured receive care. But something that's often not talked about is even if people with amazing insurance plan, I had a great job, I had a great insurance plan, but still there's that void in care for what happens next for traumatic, devastating injuries, spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, strokes, neurologic conditions that take months, years of rehabilitation. And it's a narrative, it's a different narrative altogether, because these are injuries that take time. It's not just going to the hospital, fixing a surgery. It's not just rehabilitating a torn ACL. These are life-changing injuries that take an incredibly long time of rehabilitation and specialized care. The average cost in healthcare in the United States in the first year of a spinal cord injury is $400,000 to $1 million. That's just in the first year. And every subsequent year after that, it's between $50,000 and $200,000 for hospital readmission rates, pressure sores, all the secondary complications that go hand in hand with it. So very quickly, healthcare providers start trying to advance you to that next stage, because healthcare costs are just so high. And particularly with injuries like brain, spinal cord, they look at statistics that aren't good. So the next thing you know, it's okay, what's this next step? What's this next stage? But when you're dealing with neurologic injuries, as you all know, it's a stage that can't be rushed, but that's what the process is. So I'll walk you through the process in the US. First, you spend about a week in the acute care. This is when I was in after surgery in that intensive care. I was there for a week. Some people are only there for a couple of days. Then the transition goes to a rehabilitation hospital. I was then in a rehab hospital. And again, I was lucky in my community, we had a great rehabilitation hospital specialized for neurologic injuries. But even in this case, my body was not ready to be in that rehabilitation hospital. I had a blood clot in my lungs. I had all sorts of I had a staph infection. I had, I had nothing below my neck. I was basically still unable to breathe. But quickly, the moment you get to that rehab hospital in the US, you're instantly on a time clock of insurance allowances. And that's something that we realized as well. So the rehab hospital is exactly what I wanted at the time, because that provided that beacon of hope. That provided the people, the expertise, that you had daily physical therapy, daily occupational therapy, daily speech therapy. And when you're going through an injury like that, I was at the place where I wanted to be, but I didn't know about this time clock. And I'll refer to this time clock quite a bit, because it became very apparent, even as soon as I got there, that the care quickly began getting me prepared to be home and adapt to the injury rather than trying to recover from it. So the average stay in the rehab hospital is 35 days in the US. And that is an extremely long number, to be honest with you. Many people are gone within the matter of a week or two. I was able to stay there for a little bit longer. I started gaining bits of movement back within those first couple weeks. The first movement I got was a little bit of I could twitch my hamstrings, and then I could start twitching my fingers a little bit. So those were really good signs after a spinal cord injury, recognizing that it was an incomplete injury. I was in that bucket of, there was nerves that were making, there was communication making their way through that injured spinal cord. So my therapists were amazing. The hospital was really trying to fight for more insurance time, but still, that time clock came, and I was told that I had to be discharged. Insurance would cover a sip and puff wheelchair that I would have needed at the time, but they would cover no more therapy. And I remember really getting hit hard emotionally at that point, because all of a sudden they say you're discharged and your only option then are 30 outpatient visits that you really have to continue recovery. This is coming after every day of hours upon hours, a full Army time regimen of therapy that you needed during that neuroplastic window that was so critical for me. And then at a time when I needed therapy the most, faced with a discharge, 30 outpatient visits. And if you wanted to self-pay after that, $400 or $500 a visit. That's the same amount that you get when you are seeing a physical therapist for an ACL tear. You have your entire nervous system to recover. This right here is a picture of me on the day before I was discharged. And it's blurry for a reason. I look like I'm in much better shape than I was. This is my physical therapist and occupational therapist that had me up and standing. I was only like that for about a fraction of a second. So a friend of mine had snapped a picture. I did not have the ability to stand, but they were getting me up out of my chair. It was one of the first times my blood pressure was so low that I couldn't even be upright for in a tilt table, let alone be standing. But I showed this picture because it was still a monumental moment, because I was getting a little bit of movement back. And I looked over across this gym of equipment that I could finally start to use, and I was being discharged at a time I needed it most. And it was as if I was hurt all over again. So my options were not good. They were to go home and fit a house for a wheelchair and have my parents, they weren't even ready to learn how to care for quadriplegic, or go to a nursing home. And I was advised against going to a nursing home. I did it anyway, because my parents weren't ready. And also I was able to continue a little bit of therapy, PT and OT, over the course of the next 4 months. And the care in the nursing home was awful. They had no idea how to care for a quadriplegic. If it wasn't for my parents and people that were constantly learning to range my limbs and be there for me, I certainly would have got pressure sores. But I still gained progress over those next, over the next 6 months. And by the time I left the nursing home, 6 months later, insurance cap hit again. And once again, I was still at the point where I could actually sit upright in bed, which was a huge moment from 6 months ago from a C4 spinal cord injury. But once again, insurance was capped. I was nowhere near where I needed to be. And once again, the options were go home. Around this time, I heard of a place in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States, that was founded by a physical therapist and a doctor that sort of recognized this void in care for people with spinal cord, brain injury, stroke. And I was introduced to it, and I was able to raise some funds to go there. This is an outpatient clinic, and there was a facility that this was clearly a facility that had a whole different perspective, a whole different paradigm on neurologic recovery. So my family and I realized that if there's any chance that I could try to get better, this was going to be it. And in February of 2011, I heard about NeuroWorks. My family and I, my mother and I was my mother was my caregiver. We got on a plane, and I was still in a wheelchair. We had a small apartment in Salt Lake City, and this is an outpatient clinic. But this place changed my life. It's the first time I had ever even seen body weight support treadmill system, or electrical stimulation, or aquatherapy, or any of some of the best neurologic interventions. And it was formed on a model that would help people, after insurance was up, continue their recovery. And they did it by fundraising. They did it through just a patient-centric model that the traditional healthcare system wasn't interested in doing, because it doesn't make money. They were part of the Christopher and Dana Reed Foundation Neuro Recovery Network. It's a network of sites across the US that, and there's actually one over in London called NeuroConnects. And they gathered data based on a lot of research done by the main researcher is Dr. Susan Harkema out of the University of Louisville at Fraser Institute. They study, she's been studying for years, central pattern generation through locomotor training. Now her main research is epidural stimulation and trying to translate that over the skin through neuromuscular electrical stimulation. And this site in Utah was one of those member sites. So here was the first time I had seen these interventions, let alone having continued access to them. So the point of all these NRN sites was saying, they're doing some amazing work in the lab. Let's actually move this over and help patients receive access to it, long-term access to it, while at the same time collect data for it and see how these interventions are working for people that have long-term access to it. So from February 2011 to June 2012, this was my life. I was there 3 to 4 hours a day, participating in all the interventions. And slowly but surely, I regained the ability to move my legs. I regained the ability to walk. And I remember the last thing I wanted to try to accomplish before I went home was try to drive myself back home. And my upper extremities were a lot weaker than my lower extremities. When I was first heard, doctors thought I might have central cord syndrome. And then now I'm kind of hemiplegic. My left side is still pretty paralyzed, but it took 2 years for me to actually have the strength in my anterior deltoids to be able to move a spinner knob on a steering wheel. And I remember every day after therapy, there was this school that had a driving course that I would just practice at, and I would just fail and fail and fail, trying to be able to turn this knob until finally I could do it. And that was sort of the trigger mark, saying, okay, you know what? It's been 2 years, and this place has changed my life, this different healthcare paradigm. And in June of 2012, I actually drove myself home, walking and independent, and defeating paralysis in my mind. And clearly a huge moment for my family, for myself, and trying to figure out what that next stage of life was. But it was a blank slate. That's why I always leave this slide blank, because then all of a sudden here I am defeating paralysis, but still disabled. Still, to this day, I have a lot of paralysis on my left side. I can walk, but it's very concentrated effort. I fatigue very quickly. I still have a lot of neurologic deficits. And suddenly I didn't know what to do. I had no job anymore. I had lived with my sister for a while, and it was like, what to do next? And my family and I had been so inspired by what we had seen in Utah that we wanted to try to move mountains to recreate that in Indianapolis. And that really became a new driving purpose in my life. A lot of the things didn't matter anymore. I had a new perspective and this fire in the belly to try to instigate change, similar to what's been done there. And one thing I've learned is that so many of these facilities that open through personal stories and through people that have been willing to pick up where the healthcare system fails. And so that's what I did. I started a nonprofit. It started off very modestly with trying to raise some funds through my internal contacts, and then did a crowdfunding campaign, raised $80,000 and started the foundation, started the website. And at first, I really wanted to try to convince our local rehab hospital to create a gym to be that continuum of care center, and really started pounding pavement within the local community to try to get people that would be on board. And so many people just kind of pat me on the head and say, good luck with that. It'll never work. It'll never work. We admire what you're doing, but good luck. And the first angel that I found was the University of Indianapolis. They have a fantastic physical therapy, occupational therapy school there. And the dean of the therapy school there saw the vision, saw a relationship that could exist with their school, and said, and basically gave us gave me some space to start operating it. And from there, I was introduced to a physical therapist. I recruited my very first physical therapist that you saw in that picture of me blurry. And the two of those clinicians then really saw the vision as well. And together we created Neurohope, which was born in the small gym in February of 2015. Now, at that time, we had I didn't even draw a salary. We had no therapy equipment. We had a free mat that was provided to us. I drove all the way to Michigan to appease to the headquarters of New Step to try to get a New Step donated. It's telling the story, and that worked. And then I drove to Minnesota and tried to get an Easy Stand donated, and that worked. And then I drove to Baltimore to try to get an FES cycle donated, and that did not work because they're $38,000, but we eventually were able to fundraise for it. And next thing you know, we had this little tiny miniature neuro clinic in this little one room, and we started seeing our first patients, just doing the right thing, helping patients in that window of recovery continue to recover. And as you know, all these injuries are different. None are the same. I don't contribute my ability to walk now based on my physical therapy, but it played a part in it. You know, my injury was less severe than a lot of other spinal cord injuries, but ultimately it's having that access and ability to promote recovery and providing that chance for people in that window, and then long-term, providing that chance to stay healthy and maintain activity. That's the mantra that we went on. And we didn't stop our fight there. We then went to the Indiana legislature. And in 2016, really convinced the Indiana state legislature to allocate some funds to help the patients in our community continue that journey because they're being discharged so soon. And in 2016, then Governor Mike Pence, before he was the US president, he was the governor of, or the US vice president, he was the governor of Indiana. And he signed into law a bill that would help the continuum of care for specific programs. And with that came some startup funding for our clinic to get to that next level. It was my passion to bring a neuro recovery network center to Indianapolis. And over the last 7 years, that's exactly what we've been able to do. So here's our clinic now. We participate in a lot of that locomotor training as one therapy tool in the toolbox of clinicians. We use a lot of neuromuscular electrical stimulation, both in therapy and also in functional electrical stimulation cycles that we have as part of our wellness program. And we have a small gym of fitness equipment now that we have incorporated a different sort of paradigm of care. So over the last 6 years, we've partnered with a lot of foundations. We've partnered with research groups. We've moved to a 13,000 square foot gym. We have a 15-person staff of therapists and trainers. We have a student internship program that is a huge part of what we do. We've completed data collection processes with the University of Indianapolis to really help track those outcomes, to bring that narrative that says to bring the narrative that can show not only improvement, but health and wellness, which is one of the next steps that we want to try to start tracking over the next year. We are now one of the Neuro Recovery Network sites, and most importantly, we've helped more than 250 people on their road to recovery and implemented a lot of interventions in our state of Indiana that no one else does. And we've done it through this comprehensive continuum of care, and our program's grown. We started off with just PT, providing that affordable rates and fundraising to offset those costs. But over the last several years, we've started to incorporate rehabilitative exercise as well, which has become a huge part of our program. Hiring master's levels trainers to work with our physical therapists to provide that next step. We call it guided rehabilitative exercise. And I know Reinhard mentioned Barry Moore before, who's in the audience there. So Barry has been a huge part of our team for three years now, maybe. Barry started as an intern for us when he was getting his master's degree. And one of his internship projects was to develop a wellness program, which is a third part. And that was a part that has really grown over the last several years. We call it our Path to Independence program. So in addition to physical therapy that we bill insurance for, guided rehabilitative exercise that has that second transition as insurance is up, we've realized that it's not just about rehab. It's not just about that neuroplastic window. It's about continued health as well. It's just as important. Helping people stay active, helping people develop specialized fitness plans, open gym access, supervised gym access. These are all hours that we have allocated throughout our plan or throughout our day. And we've also implemented group classes, group fitness classes, strengthening classes. And together, it's this model that we have seen work in other communities. We've sort of have made it uniquely work in ours. And it's something that we've been successful with. And we've really rallied the community around as they see this vision is not just physical therapy. It's a lifetime worth of rehabilitation and health and wellness. They're all together. So I guess real quickly, I can show you a couple. So part of the locomotor training that we do, this is an embedded video that I kind of threw in there. It's unique training that central pattern generators, and there's multiple clinicians. They develop specific sensory input to the nervous system, while there's another clinician on the back with the hip for proper gait kinematics and a body weight support treadmill system. And this is one kind of version of locomotor training that we implement. But a lot of places don't do things like this because it takes 4 clinicians, and for someone to really benefit, they need months of access. And when insurance only provides 30 visits, and when healthcare systems have to allocate 4 people, they say it's not worth it. So they just don't offer it. And in my opinion, that's not an excuse to not offer some of the best interventions possible. And then this is, the next slide is a clip of, just a short clip of one of our wellness classes. This is part of our monthly package. So we have therapy, we have individualized sessions, and then, like I mentioned, think of like our vision in the next year is to develop a fully accessible fitness center, and to develop that with classes, cardio classes. This is one we call NeuroFit, where everyone's attached to a heart rate monitor. You can see there on the screen, and we have someone leading it, and really gets people going, gets heart rates going. They make games out of it. And it's become a very successful part of our program. We've added morning classes, and we're adding other classes that are involved with massage, stretching, and we had yoga the other day. It's all part of this, comprehensive program. So we saw 102 patients in 2021. We're currently helping 81 right now. We have a wait list. one of the things that we want to do is continue to add staff, add trainers, add physical therapists. As I mentioned, our big priority over the next year is to bolster our wellness center, so then we can truly have that multidisciplinary PT clinic, fitness center, and we'll all work together to try to help hospital readmission rates. That's one of the things we really want to focus on now. Is we're going to be applying for a grant this fall that can track that, because one of the things that I've learned running Neurohope for the last 6 years and trying to fundraise is, when I go to foundations, when I go to insurance companies, they say, certainly, we can see that it makes sense that keeping people fit and active will keep them out of the healthcare system, these high cost injuries. But show us data. You show us data, that's where the money will come. And so that's one thing that we want to do, is to work with in our next project, is to show and track hospital readmission rates, to then go back and try to get, so in US we have Medicaid and Medicare, some insurance covered programs. And if we can get them to cover fitness and wellness, that opens up a whole new opportunity for patients and for centers like Neurohope. So I'll bring it back to my face again. So that's sort of the process in general. It's a process that started with my personal journey, has evolved into so much more. And when I think about centers like Neurohope and like your center there, and so many others around the country that are doing the right thing for patients, it's so often that's what it's up to. It's up to organizations. It's up to finding the right staff members that believe in it, because the staff are the ones that make this go. It's finding the right clinicians, and it's really trying to change healthcare. And when healthcare doesn't do it, when insurance companies won't do it, it's so often up to the families that are affected by it to move mountains to make it possible. And I know that's what you're doing out there in Ireland. That's what we're trying to do here. And we move forward, and we find a lot of success, and it's something that is very much worthwhile for me, for my staff, and all the patients we help. So thanks for letting me chat about it. And sorry for the snafu in the beginning, but if anyone has questions, I'm more than happy to answer. I could not hear your audio before. I don't know if we got that fixed, but.
Chris, thank you very much. Can you hear us okay? Can you hear me okay, Chris?
I can't hear you there, Reinhard. So
take the mic out.
Chris, can you hear us? Hello?
Yeah, I don't have any audio.
I don't think you can.
The technical problems persist, so.
Microphone.
No, sorry. This.
So can you hear us now, Chris? Yeah.
One thing is, I can log in back on my other computer like I did before. I got audio on that one.
Okay. Saka can hear us. He should as well be able to hear us.
I'm doing that now.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting in another waiting room with my other computer. If you can let me in there.
Yeah, you're in.
There we go. I can hear you. There, we're back on.
Okay. You have to mute one of your two computers.
Yeah, I'm going to turn off.
Okay, it's gone.
Yeah, we can make it work. I'll get my video going.
We can hear you. Okay,
all right,
good.
I can hear you now. So I just can't share my screen on this one.
So yeah, no, very interesting. Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. And there's lots of parallels, as you said, between what you have been doing and with what we are doing here. The different countries and the different systems probably present different challenges. You have a slightly different population, maybe, but there are lots of overlaps. Wondering if there's if anybody has a question here, they would have to come up to the computer, I think, to talk into the microphone. Yeah, there's the guy that we're visiting here in Dublin City University, Ronan. He runs the exoskeleton. Maybe he can introduce himself.
Well, maybe you might stick around, Chris, if you can afterwards. I had a question around, you kind of touched briefly on your plans to demonstrate that what you guys do prevents future hospitalization, so has a health economics benefit. Have you any more detail on kind of how you intend to show that and make a compelling argument around that? Or I don't mean to put you on the spot, you may not have details, but if you have a little bit more fleshing on that, it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so we have so our wellness director, his name is Bart, and he is kind of quarterbacking that at the moment, and we're also working with the folks at NeuroWorks that I mentioned. They have sort of been doing a little bit of, it's been nothing official, sort of like anecdotal tracking of their patients. Have they been readmitted to the hospital for UTIs, for muscle contractures, for pressure sores? We're using some of those survey data, but one of the things that we're going to be doing in the fall is writing a grant with some university, with either University of Indianapolis or Indiana University, to work with an investigator that will really be able to be more in tune with that than myself. But the goal is to really come up with a actionable data collection process that will track readmission rates. Insurance companies have plenty of data on their staff member or on their patients that on these high cost patients. So we want to say, okay, if there are measures that we can track for people that have access to this continued rehabilitation and wellness, and if we can point that toward savings, that's huge. So there's another foundation in Colorado that has done this, and I've been having some conversations with them as well. They've done this for yoga, things like they got a Medicaid waiver to cover yoga and stretching and things like that. So if we work with them to try to cover that with fitness, which if it covers yoga, you'd think it would be able to cover fitness. But again, when you're talking about going through government change in the US, now it's state by state. It's still a lengthy process, but it starts with data collection. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. We're still kind of hashing it out, but it's basically trying to work with some principal investigators that say, what are some of the measures that we want to look for? Primarily hospital readmission rates, because that's what insurance companies see, the cost of care. I think 40% of spinal cord injuries get put back into the hospital system due to those, and then they stay for an average of 10 or 12 days. It's just an incredibly high cost of care. So if we can show that, hey, if people have access to this, that can prevent it, that's sort of where we want to begin the conversation. We're still very much early in the process.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Is anybody else with questions? Maybe some of the folks who are online or in the room here.
I actually do have a question. For context, I'm studying to be a speech therapist, and I was considering working in neurorehabilitation, but one of the settings I was interested in was a rehab hospital. So with your experience in being in a rehab hospital and not being there when your body's not ready yet, but you have like that limited time window, is there anything that your clinicians did that was helpful to you in that situation, or that they could have done that would have been helpful to kind of work within the healthcare system that exists in the US?
That's a good question. My clinicians were amazing in my rehabilitation hospital. And that's one thing when I always talk about, when I tell my story, especially locally, it's, our rehab hospital is fantastic. The PT, the OT, the speech that I received, my only issue was that I didn't want it to end, and it did way too quickly. But I think the expertise that we had at those at that acute level, they really knew how they knew neurologic injury, and so no, they were amazing. And again, I hired my very first therapist to help start Neurohope with me. So that I think is what's important about, and that's honestly why when I started Neurohope, there's a lot of gyms out there that exist and for neurologic recovery. But when I started Neurohope, I still wanted that clinician's expertise. So it was still very important for me to find people that knew neuro and were experts in neuro. And then I wanted to blend the two. So having that expertise at the rehab hospital, no, I mean, they were fantastic.
Did that answer your question, Catherine?
Yeah, I guess just as a follow-up, was there anything like, how do clinicians, like, did they do anything to give you things that you could work on afterwards or things like that to kind of stretch it as much as possible within that allotted time frame of insurance?
They did, because they sort of recognized, and I will say, I can recall they sort of recognized that they needed to start working with me on goals to get home, which is important, because they recognized that I was going to be out of there in a matter of weeks. So, you know, those activities of daily living and those OT goals are wonderful, but they don't focus on, you know, recovery. And they would do everything they could once they start. And I guess I was a little bit of a fortunate case because I was getting bits of recovery back. So they would like give me TheraBands and stuff for when I would, you know, be sitting back in my hospital room, and they would go out of their way to say, listen, even when you're, you know, out of your session, you know, use this when you're sitting there laying in bed at night, even though you can only move a little bit of your fingers. And at that point, that's all I could move. I couldn't do a lot of things. I was virtually a head on a pillow. But they would find some of those early signals, and they would really ingrain in my brain. And I still give them a lot of merit for my education early on, because I didn't know anything about spinal cord injury. But they would really ingrain in my brain, listen, you are in a very early window of neuroplasticity where the brain's trying to heal. So keep sending those signals down, keep trying, even if it's just moving a finger, even if it's just moving, doing, you know, dorsiflexion ankle pumps in your bed. Just keep trying to send those signals down during those windows. And I remember really focusing a lot on that. But like I said, early on, there wasn't a lot that I could do. I couldn't do a lot of those things until by the time I got to NeuroWorks, because, you know, I was totally paralyzed.
Well, it's certainly amazing to see that the pictures from after the accident to what you're now and what you're doing and what you have achieved. It's amazing. It's, in a way, it's a bit sad that it takes somebody, as you said, you know, who really should be looked after and should not be put in a position to start his own Neurohope organization and network. But it's great. It's really admirable what you have achieved.
Thanks. Thank you. So I've got a quick question for you guys. So, you know, you kind of heard me talk about the American system. Is it similar there? I a couple of years ago, I spoke at a conference in England, and I felt kind of dumb because afterwards, some of the people were like, "Oh yeah, we don't have that problem here." It seems like you might in Ireland. That's why you have your clinic there. But is it similar?
Well, and Saol is focusing on people with severe acquired brain injuries. We also have other clients and patients there in the afternoon at the moment, but that's you know, that arose out of the, you know, particular situations. There are in theory programs for people with stroke and spinal injury. There was nothing at all. There wasn't even waiting lists for people with severe acquired brain injury. They were just shipped off to nursing homes and minimal maintenance, and that's why we set up Saol. But you know, we found over the last year, we have only been around for 2 years. We found that, you know, other people are in a similar situation. So where in theory there should be programs there should be an ongoing rehabilitation intervention. In practice, very often there isn't. We are trying to position on Saol somewhere, you know, and we are funded by a government grant for a 3-year pilot project, and we hope that funding will continue. But there's no guarantee. At the moment, it looks really positive. But you know, people, we had the day before yesterday when we started the summer school, we had a talk by Professor Finns. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has written a book called Rights Come to Mind, and he describes, and in his talk he described that too. That people are sometimes, you know, people who have no hope, you know, people are being told very early that it's not worth doing anything because they're not going to get better, you know, they don't say that, but really what they imply is they're most likely going to die sometime, you know, soon, not going the natural way. But What we have found and what we are seeing is that is different. And I think what the science says about spinal cord injury and stroke is similar. I think that, but what the practice does is hasn't really caught up with the science and with the living proof of people who, through intervention and through lifelong therapy, really got much further than was ever predicted by the existing hospital and insurance system. It's here. It's not so much. I think it's not so much. It's always said that it is a financial issue. I wouldn't think it is primarily a financial issue. I think it's primarily an issue of a matter of convincing people that it makes sense to continue, not just to get more improvement, but also because once people are alive, they have a right. They have even disabled people have a right to participate in life and be integrated in normal life activities. And if they need more help, then it is it's society that has to support them. And that is, I think, the biggest task, at the core of everything, that the system, society, have to be convinced that they are, that even people with disabilities, even people with, in our case, with very severe acquired brain injuries, are alive, and because they're alive, they have rights. And that is, in my mind, that is at the core of it. And then, once that has been recognized, the money should really follow, hopefully. And it should not just depend on donations or on how much private funding somebody has. That this should be a thing for a society to support and develop. But that's a huge task, and in the meantime, we have to do what you're doing and what we are doing, and trying to find our way, through the system and exist and develop, despite what is still being practiced very widely, which is what you described there. Is I think we have some Germans here. I'm kind of originally German, so I've been some knowledge from the German system, and I think it kind of goes in waves. Probably, there was a time when there was nothing, then there was a lot of enthusiasm and funding, and then people looked at how that money was spent, and then the funding was went down a little bit, and everything is being measured, and the way it is being measured is people look at how it is being measured. Hospital admissions is one thing, but there's other criteria, that is important, like and even very subjective criteria. And we had even people here from the HSE, from the Health Service Executive, saying that a lot of the criteria of success and outcome measures are and should be based on subjective experiences. So if you feel that after the interventions you are better, you participate more with your family, in other activities of life, and that is by itself is a good thing, and demonstrates that what is being done is useful. So there, but I think, like, even at least in our case, it's not even clear what the outcome measures should be. That's something that we have to work on.
In the US, it's just based on insurance coverage. It's like your therapy is based on insurance coverage, and that's it. So
I'm afraid, Chris, we have to come to an end, because we have Ronan here in the box waiting to start his presentation.
Well, it was great to speak with you all.
Yeah, and we should continue the conversation. I'm going to stop the recording here now. I'll find the button. And